Move your wrinkled hands off the counter, Grandma. People like you don't walk out of here with $4,000 in cash. Officer Brent Maddox didn't even bother hiding the smirk as he snatched Evelyn Bird's ID from her trembling fingers, lifting it with two gloved pinches like it carried a disease. You should have kept your little Social Security check and stayed quiet, shoving her toward the door as customers stared. Now you're gonna learn what happens when folks like you pretend to have money. Evelyn didn't move her eyes from the pavement outside, where a row of heavy boots, leather vests, and full-face helmets had already turned toward the glass doors, watching every second Maddox's hand tightened on her arm. He hadn't realized yet that he wasn't the only one watching her. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning sun warmed Evelyn Bird's face as she stepped off the bus in front of Stonebrook Federal Bank. Her arthritis was flaring up again, making each step with her cane a little challenge. But the thought of her granddaughter's beaming face kept her moving forward. "Almost there," she whispered to herself, clutching the folder of scholarship papers against her chest like something precious. The bank's glass doors slid open, welcoming her into the cool air conditioning. Friday mornings were usually busy, and today was no exception. A line of customers snaked from the teller's windows. Evelyn took her place at the end. "Next customer, please," called a young man with a crisp white shirt and a name tag that read Ryan Keller. Evelyn stepped forward, offering a warm smile. "Good morning, young man." Ryan Keller didn't return the smile. His eyes darted around, never quite meeting hers. He looked fresh out of college, with hands that hadn't yet developed the confidence of experience. "How can I help you?" he asked, his voice pitched slightly higher than natural. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please." Evelyn set her folder down and began opening it. $4,000 for my granddaughter's college housing deposit. The deadline is Monday. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. "That's quite a large amount of cash." "Yes, I suppose it is." Evelyn nodded pleasantly. "But her university requires the housing deposit in cash or money order. I've been saving for this day since she was born." "I'll need to see some identification," Ryan said, his tone changing subtly. "Of course." Evelyn reached for her purse, her fingers stiff and uncooperative. She fumbled with the clasp, feeling suddenly nervous under his watchful stare. Her purse was full. Prescription bottles, tissues, receipts, hard candies wrapped in crinkly plastic. "Just give me a moment." "It's in here somewhere." Ryan's posture stiffened. He glanced toward his manager's office, then back at Evelyn's searching hands. "Is there a problem?" she asked, finally locating her wallet beneath a packet of tissues. No problem," Ryan said quickly. Too quickly. Evelyn pulled out her driver's license and bank card, sliding them across the counter. "Here you are." Ryan picked up her ID, studying it longer than seemed necessary. Then he tapped something into his computer, frowning at the screen. "One moment, Mrs. Bird. I need to verify something with my manager." Before Evelyn could respond, Ryan was walking briskly toward a glass office where a man in an expensive-looking suit sat reviewing papers. Frank Dillard. She'd seen him before, but had never been helped by him directly. He was one of those men who seemed to look through people rather than at them. Through the glass, she watched their conversation. Ryan leaned down, speaking quietly, but pointing back in her direction. Frank Dillard looked up, past Ryan, directly at Evelyn. There was something in that look that made her stomach tighten. Not surprise or concern, but something colder. Something she had seen before, many times in her 74 years. Frank stood up, straightening his tie, and followed Ryan back to the counter. "Mrs. Bird," he said, without extending his hand. His voice carried across the bank lobby. "You're attempting to withdraw $4,000 in cash?" Evelyn noticed how heads turned. She kept her voice low and dignified. "Yes, for my granddaughter's college housing deposit." "And why exactly do people like you need that much cash at once?" Frank asked, not bothering to lower his voice. The words landed like a slap. "People like you." She knew exactly what he meant. "My granddaughter's university requires—" "Yes, yes," Frank cut her off, waving a dismissive hand. "Ryan will help you verify your account. We have procedures for large cash transactions." Frank turned away, and Ryan stepped forward again, not quite meeting her eyes. "I'll just need to run some additional verification on your account, Mrs. Bird. It shouldn't take long." But instead of typing anything into his computer, Ryan stepped away toward the back area behind the teller windows. She watched as he picked up a phone, turning his back to her. Evelyn stood alone at the counter, clutching her folder with her granddaughter's future inside. The pain in her legs had faded into the background, replaced by a familiar feeling of being made invisible. She'd worked her whole life, 32 years serving food in the school cafeteria, volunteering at church every Sunday, raising her children and helping with grandchildren. Now, at 74, she was being treated like a criminal for trying to access her own money. She glanced around the bank. Other customers were being helped. A young white couple laughed with their teller as they deposited a check. An older white man in a business suit was escorted to the loan officer's office with a cup of coffee in his hand. And here she stood, waiting like she had so many times before. Through the large front windows, she saw movement in the parking lot. 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights off, but positioned directly in front of the entrance. Her heart skipped a beat. Surely they weren't here for her. But deep down, she knew. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Frank emerged from his office again, glancing toward the front entrance with what looked almost like satisfaction. Ryan remained in the back, no longer even pretending to work on her transaction. Evelyn stood perfectly still, her knuckles white around the handle of her cane. She had done nothing wrong. The money was hers, saved dollar by dollar over years. All the paperwork was in order. Her ID was valid. But none of that seemed to matter as the 2 police officers pushed through the front doors, hands resting casually on their belts near their weapons. The bank fell silent as the officers scanned the room, their eyes quickly finding Frank Dillard, who nodded slightly in Evelyn's direction. She wanted to speak, to explain, to show them her folder with all the scholarship papers and the letter from the university about the housing deposit. But her mouth had gone dry, and that old familiar feeling washed over her, the one that told her that speaking up would only make things worse. So she stood there, a 74-year-old grandmother with arthritis and a lifetime of hard work behind her, waiting for what would come next, unaware that outside in the parking lot, a group of men in leather vests had just pulled up on rumbling motorcycles, heading for the ATM on the side of the building. The glass doors of Stonebrook Federal Bank swung open with a whoosh as officers Brent Maddox and Cliff Harlan strode in. Maddox led the way, his broad shoulders squared and jaw set tight. Harlan followed 2 steps behind, mimicking his partner's confident posture, but lacking the natural swagger. "Which one?" Maddox muttered, scanning the bank. Frank Dillard stepped forward, gesturing subtly toward Evelyn with a slight nod. "That's her, officers." Evelyn felt her heart pounding against her ribs as the 2 white officers approached. The taller one, Officer Maddox, according to his nameplate, had cold blue eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. The shorter one, Officer Harlan, kept glancing around at the other customers as if embarrassed to be there. "Ma'am," Maddox said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "we received a call about suspicious activity. What exactly are you doing here today?" Evelyn straightened her spine despite the pain. "I'm just making a withdrawal from my account, officer. For my granddaughter's—" "A withdrawal of how much?" Maddox cut in, stepping closer. $4,000, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's for my granddaughter's college housing deposit. I have all the paperwork right here." She gestured to the folder on the counter. Maddox didn't even glance at it. 4,000 in cash? And where'd someone like you get that kind of money? The insult stung, but Evelyn had heard worse. It's my money, officer. I've been saving it for years. I worked at Westfield Elementary School cafeteria for 32. Let me see that ID again, Maddox demanded, cutting her off once more. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she held out her driver's license. Instead of taking it gently, Maddox snatched it from her fingers. Harlan, take a look at this, he said, holding the ID up. Doesn't look right to me. Officer Harlan peered at the license and shrugged. Could be fake, he offered weakly, clearly just going along. It most certainly is not fake, Evelyn protested, her voice rising slightly. I've been a customer at this bank for over 40 years. Behind the officers, Frank Dillard stood with arms crossed, a smug look on his face. He made no move to confirm Evelyn's identity, though she'd seen him nod hello to her in the bank many times before. If you'll just check my account in your system, Evelyn said to Ryan, who was hovering nervously behind his counter. You'll see everything is in order. Ma'am, we're handling this now, Maddox said sharply. The bank has reason to believe you're attempting to commit fraud. Fraud? Evelyn's voice cracked. That's ridiculous. The money is mine. A few customers shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the confrontation and their phones or the floor. No one spoke up. Do you have any other identification? Harlan asked, his tone slightly less hostile than his partner's. Yes, I have my Social Security card in my purse, Evelyn said, reaching for her bag. Stop! Maddox shouted, his hand instantly moving to his weapon. Keep your hands where I can see them. I'm just getting my... Maddox moved with shocking speed for a man his size. He grabbed Evelyn's arm, the one not holding her cane, and twisted it behind her back. She cried out in pain as her purse tumbled to the floor, spilling tissues and medicine bottles across the polished tiles. You're hurting me, she gasped. Stop resisting, Maddox growled, though she wasn't resisting at all. With practiced efficiency, he slapped a handcuff around her wrist, the cold metal biting into her skin. Her cane clattered to the floor as he secured her other wrist, yanking her arms back so roughly she thought her shoulder might pop. The bank had gone completely silent. Evelyn could hear nothing but her own ragged breathing and the blood rushing in her ears. Tears sprang to her eyes, not from fear, but from the humiliation of it all. She'd lived through the civil rights era, had seen water hoses turned on people, had been called names no human should ever be called, and here she was, 7 decades later, being treated like a criminal for trying to help her granddaughter. Evelyn Byrd, you're under arrest for attempted bank fraud and resisting arrest, Maddox announced loudly. I didn't resist. I didn't do anything wrong, Evelyn protested, her voice breaking. Harlan picked up her cane and folder, avoiding her eyes as he did so. Maddox gripped her upper arm tight enough to bruise and began marching her toward the door. Her legs, already painful from arthritis, struggled to keep up with his pace. My purse, she said desperately. My medicine is in my purse. We'll take it as evidence, Maddox replied coldly. Outside, the morning had grown warmer. The sun seemed to mock the darkness of what was happening as Maddox pushed Evelyn across the parking lot toward the waiting squad car. From the corner of her eye, Evelyn noticed movement. A group of motorcycles was parked near the ATM on the side of the building. Big, gleaming machines with leather-clad riders standing beside them. Through her tears, she recognized the red beard of the largest man, the one they called Big Red, who always nodded respectfully when she passed by on Friday mornings. Sometimes she brought them leftover pastries from her church's Thursday night social. Big Red was watching now, his expression changing from confusion to recognition to something darker as he took in the scene before him. The other bikers, she knew some of their strange nicknames, Knuckles, Stitch, and Tinker were turning toward the commotion, too. "Please," Evelyn said to Maddox, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is all a mistake." "Save it for the judge," Maddox snapped, pushing her forward again. Her toe caught on a crack in the asphalt, and she stumbled. Maddox yanked her upright roughly, making her cry out again as pain shot through her shoulders. That sound, her cry of pain, seemed to trigger something. From the ATM area came heavy footsteps. Evelyn turned her head to see Big Red striding toward them, his massive frame moving with surprising purpose. His leather vest showed patches she'd never understood, but had always respected. Behind him, the other bikers rose like a wall of leather and denim. Big Red stopped directly in their path, his weathered face set in stone as he stared at the officers. His eyes found Evelyn's briefly, a flash of recognition passing between them before he returned his steely gaze to Maddox. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence, 6'4" of tattooed intensity with a fiery red beard, spoke volumes. The other angels spread out behind him, a silent barrier between the police car and Evelyn. Maddox's grip on Evelyn's arm tightened painfully. She could feel him tense, suddenly unsure, as he faced not a frail grandmother he could intimidate, but something entirely different. Men who weren't afraid of him at all. "Move aside," Maddox ordered, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "This is police business." Big Red didn't budge. He just stood there, helmet in hand, eyes locked on Maddox with the stillness of someone who had seen too much in life to be easily intimidated. Behind him, engines rumbled as more bikes pulled into the lot. "Excuse me, officer." Big Red's voice was surprisingly calm, almost gentle, but with an unmistakable edge of steel beneath it. "Mind telling us why you're arresting Miss Evelyn?" Maddox's head snapped up. His hand instinctively moved toward his gun, but he caught himself when he realized just how many bikers were now forming a loose semicircle around the police car. There were at least 8 of them. Massive men in leather cuts covered with patches, arms crossed or hands on hips, faces unreadable behind sunglasses and beards. "This is police business," Maddox snapped, but Evelyn could hear the slight waver in his voice. "Back up now, or you'll be joining her." Harlan shifted nervously beside them, his eyes darting between the bikers and his partner. Instead of backing away, the bikers took a single step forward in perfect unison. They weren't touching anyone or making threats, just standing their ground. "See? That's where you're wrong," Big Red said, removing his sunglasses. "Miss Evelyn brings us cookies sometimes, tells us about her granddaughter. She's a friend," he gestured around, "and we look after our friends." Tinker, a slender biker with a long gray ponytail, had pulled out his phone and was filming the entire interaction. Other customers from the bank had gathered at the entrance, and several had their phones out too. "Put that away," Harlan said, pointing at Tinker's phone. "Public place, public servant," Tinker replied calmly. "It's my right." Evelyn stood awkwardly between Maddox and the car door, her wrists throbbing in the handcuffs. She caught sight of Frank Dillard watching from the doorway of the bank, his smug expression fading as he realized how many witnesses were now recording. "What's she supposed to have done?" Big Red asked, his eyes locked on Maddox's. "Because from where we were standing, looked like an old lady trying to get her own money from her own bank account." Knuckles, a burly biker with tattoos covering both arms, nodded. "Been coming here every Friday morning for years. Never caused no trouble." The radio on Maddox's shoulder crackled to life. "Unit 17, this is dispatch. What's your status at Stonebrook Federal?" Maddox hesitated, then grabbed the radio. "Situation under control," he said tightly. "We're getting multiple calls about a confrontation in the parking lot," the dispatcher replied. "Do you need backup?" People were gathering on the sidewalk now. Cars slowed as they passed. Someone from inside the bank had clearly called the station. The dispatcher continued. Chief says to de-escalate and clear the scene. Repeat, de-escalate and clear. Maddox's face flushed red. He glared at the bikers, then at Evelyn, then at the growing crowd. "This isn't over," he muttered. Then louder, "Turn around, ma'am." With stiff movements, he unlocked Evelyn's handcuffs. She immediately brought her hands forward, rubbing her wrists where angry red marks were already forming. "Looks like there's been a misunderstanding," Maddox said, loud enough for the onlookers to hear. "You're free to go." Evelyn couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up with unshed tears. The relief of being released battled with the humiliation of the arrest and the injustice of it all. "A misunderstanding?" Big Red repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "That what you call putting cuffs on a grandmother for no reason?" Stitch, a barrel-chested biker with a neat gray beard, stepped forward and gently placed his hand under Evelyn's elbow. "You okay, Miss Evelyn?" he asked softly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Let's get you back inside to finish your business," Stitch said. "We'll wait with you." The bikers formed a protective ring around her as they walked back toward the bank entrance. Maddox and Harlan didn't try to stop them. They retreated to their squad car, speaking in hushed, angry tones. Frank Dillard stood in the doorway, his face a mask of forced pleasantness. "Mrs. Bird," he said smoothly, "I'm so terribly sorry for the confusion. If you'll come to my office, we can—" "There wasn't any confusion," Big Red interrupted. "You called the cops on her for taking out her own money." Frank's smile became brittle. "I assure you, it was a misunderstanding about—" "I just want my money," Evelyn said, finding her voice at last. "The $4,000 from my account. For my granddaughter's housing deposit." Frank hesitated, his eyes darting between her and the intimidating circle of bikers. "Of course. Right away." Inside, the bank had gone eerily quiet. Customers stared as the unlikely group moved toward the counter. Evelyn's purse and cane had been retrieved from the floor. The spilled contents had been gathered up and returned to her bag. Ryan, the young teller, couldn't meet her eyes as he counted out the cash. His hands trembled slightly. "Here you go, Mrs. Bird," he said, pushing the money across the counter. "I'm really sorry about what happened." Evelyn placed the cash carefully in her wallet, then tucked it deep into her purse. Her own hands were still shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her feeling drained and suddenly very old. "Can we give you a ride home, Miss Evelyn?" Big Red asked as they walked back outside. "Don't think you should be alone right now." She looked up at him, this mountain of a man with fierce eyes that somehow held nothing but kindness when they looked at her. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "I usually take the bus." "It's no trouble," he assured her. "We were heading that direction anyway." This wasn't true, and they both knew it, but Evelyn felt too shaky to argue. The thought of sitting on the bus, trying to hold herself together in front of strangers, was too much. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'd appreciate that." Big Red nodded and gestured to where their motorcycles waited. "Don't worry, we'll go slow," he promised with a gentle smile. "Knuckles has a sidecar on his bike. Most comfortable seat you'll ever sit in." As they walked toward the motorcycles, Evelyn was acutely aware of the stares following them. Bank customers watched from the windows. The officers sat in their patrol car, Maddox's face dark with anger. Knuckles helped her into the sidecar, making sure she was comfortable and secure. "First motorcycle ride?" he asked with a grin. "First, and probably last," Evelyn admitted, managing a small smile despite everything. "You might change your mind after this," he said, handing her a spare helmet. "Nothing feels quite like the freedom of the open road." As the engines rumbled to life around her, Evelyn caught one last glimpse of Officers Maddox and Harlan watching helplessly from their squad car. Their faces were twisted with frustration and something that looked like promise of future trouble. But for now, surrounded by her unlikely guardians, Evelyn felt something she hadn't expected. Safe. The motorcycles pulled out of the parking lot in perfect formation, carrying her away from the bank and the morning's horrors. Behind them, the officer's patrol car remained motionless, unable to follow without revealing the pettiness of their intentions to the watching crowd. Evelyn's modest bungalow on Maple Street looked exactly as she'd left it that morning. The yellow curtains still fluttered in the open windows. Her porch swing still creaked in the late morning breeze. Her garden gnome still smiled its chipped smile beside the front steps. Yet everything felt different now. The rumble of motorcycles broke the quiet of her neighborhood as the Hells Angels pulled up to her curb in perfect formation. Mrs. Parker peeked through her blinds across the street, mouth hanging open at the sight of her elderly neighbor climbing out of a motorcycle sidecar with the help of a tattooed giant. "Thank you," Evelyn said, as Knuckles steadied her. Her legs still felt wobbly, and the reality of what had happened at the bank was sinking in deeper with each passing minute. Big Red removed his helmet and looked up at her tidy little house with its flower boxes and wen chimes. "Nice place you got, Miss Evelyn." "Would you like to come in for some iced tea?" she offered, surprising herself. "I've got fresh mint from the garden." "Don't want to impose," Big Red said, though his eyes softened at the invitation. "Please," Evelyn said. "I could use the company right now." The thought of being alone with her thoughts was suddenly unbearable. Big Red nodded to the others. "You boys head on back. Knuckles and I will make sure Miss Evelyn's settled." The other bikers nodded respectfully to Evelyn before starting their engines and pulling away. Only Big Red and Knuckles remained, following her up the worn wooden steps to her front porch. Inside, Evelyn's hands trembled as she filled 3 glasses with ice from the freezer. "Let me help with that," Knuckles said gently, taking the pitcher from her unsteady grip. "You just sit down." "I'm not usually like this," Evelyn said, easing herself onto a kitchen chair. "I don't know what's wrong with me." "Shock," Big Red said simply, sitting across from her. His massive frame made her kitchen chair look like doll furniture. "What happened to you today wasn't right." Knuckles set the glasses of tea on the table and took the third chair. Despite his intimidating appearance, arms covered in tattoos, a leather vest bearing patches she didn't understand, his movements were careful and considerate in her space. "I've never been in trouble with the law," Evelyn said, her voice small. "Never even had a parking ticket in all my 74 years. "You weren't in trouble today either," Big Red said firmly. "Those officers were wrong. Plain and simple." Evelyn stared at the red marks on her wrists, where the handcuffs had dug into her skin. "I just wanted to help my granddaughter with her college housing. That's all." Her voice cracked. $4,000? My own money? "That manager had no right," Knuckles said, a flash of anger crossing his face. "I've been watching that guy for years. Treats folks different depending on who they are." "You noticed that too?" Evelyn asked. Big Red nodded. "We see a lot sitting out there in that parking lot. People don't really pay much attention to us, so we observe things." "Like what?" Evelyn asked, taking a sip of her tea. "Like how that Frank fella runs out to open the door for certain customers, but makes others wait," Knuckles explained. "Or how some folks get offered coffee and comfortable chairs, while others get the third degree over simple transactions." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I always felt it, but I thought maybe I was being too sensitive." "You weren't," Big Red assured her. "And what happened today crossed a serious line." "Why did you help me?" Evelyn asked. "You didn't have to get involved." Big Red looked almost embarrassed. "You remember last Christmas? You brought us those gingerbread cookies when we were collecting for the toy drive?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "I remember. You were all freezing out there. And last spring, when it was pouring rain and you came out with that big umbrella for Tinker while he was fixing his bike?" She nodded. "That's why," Big Red said simply. "You treat people right, so we do the same." Evelyn felt tears welling up again. I just don't understand why they did that to me today. Big Red and Knuckles exchanged a look that told her they understood exactly why, but were too polite to say it outright. Listen, Big Red said, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. He scribbled something down and slid it across the table. This is my number. You call any time you need anything, day or night. Evelyn looked at the paper. I couldn't impose. It's not imposing, Knuckles interrupted gently. It's community. And around here, you're part of ours. They stayed for another half hour, talking quietly, making sure Evelyn had calmed down before they left. Big Red insisted on checking her locks and peering out her windows, as if assessing security. Knuckles asked if she had family nearby who could stay with her. Just my granddaughter, but she's at college in Durham, Evelyn explained. I don't want to worry her with this. When they finally departed, Evelyn stood on her porch and watched their motorcycles disappear around the corner. The neighborhood seemed to exhale collectively, returning to its usual quiet state. It's over now, she told herself, going back inside. A terrible mistake, but it's done. She spent the next few hours trying to settle her nerves. She watered her plants, folded laundry, and prepared a simple lunch she couldn't bring herself to eat. Every few minutes, she found herself rubbing her wrists, the ghost of those handcuffs still tight around her skin. At 3 o'clock, her phone rang. Evelyn didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Mrs. Bird? A young woman's voice came through, hushed and urgent. Yes, this is she. This is Marisol Rivera. I'm a teller at Stonebrook Federal. I saw what happened this morning. Evelyn sat down heavily on her couch. Oh, I see. I'm calling because… The young woman paused, and Evelyn could hear her breathing nervously. Because I couldn't sleep tonight if I didn't tell you the truth. The truth about what, dear? Mr. Dillard didn't call the police because he thought you were suspicious, Marisol whispered. He called them because he didn't want you taking out that much cash. Evelyn's heart thumped painfully in her chest. What do you mean? After you left, he was laughing about it in his office with Ryan. Said he was teaching you a lesson about… Marisol's voice dropped even lower. About people like you trying to withdraw that kind of money all at once. Evelyn's hand tightened on the receiver. I see. He told Ryan you were probably running money for street kids. That's what he called them. Said you people always claim it's for family, but it's really for… Marisol couldn't finish the sentence. For drugs, Evelyn supplied, her voice hollow. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Bird. It wasn't right. None of it was right. No, Evelyn agreed quietly. It wasn't. I could get fired for telling you this, Marisol added. But my abuela raised me better than to stay quiet when someone's been wronged. Thank you for telling me, Marisol, Evelyn said. Your grandmother raised you well. After they hung up, Evelyn sat motionless on the couch, the afternoon sun slanting through her curtains and casting long shadows across the living room. The house felt suddenly too quiet, too empty. She walked slowly to her kitchen table and sat down, placing her hands flat on the surface. The bruises on her wrists were darkening now, turning from angry red to deep purple. So it wasn't a mistake after all, she whispered to the empty room. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. Not a misunderstanding. Not an overzealous teller. Not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was deliberate. It was because of who she was. It was because Frank Dillard had looked at a 74-year-old black grandmother and seen something dangerous, something criminal, something less than human. Outside her window, a neighbor's lawnmower droned on. A dog barked. A car door slammed. The world continued as if nothing had happened, as if her dignity hadn't been stripped away in front of a bank full of people, as if she hadn't been handcuffed and nearly dragged away for trying to access her own money. Evelyn touched the bruises gently, feeling the pain beneath her fingertips. Physical proof of what had happened. Evidence she couldn't ignore or explain away. The tears she'd been holding back finally came, sliding silently down her cheeks as she sat alone at her kitchen table. Evelyn forced herself to eat a small dinner, even though her appetite had vanished. She moved through her kitchen with practiced motions, cutting vegetables, stirring broth for her soup, toasting a single slice of bread. The familiar routine helped calm her nerves, though her mind kept returning to Marisol's phone call. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered to herself, a prayer she'd relied on throughout her life. Just as she raised the spoon to her lips, a loud crash from outside shattered the quiet. The sound of metal hitting pavement echoed through the front of the house. Evelyn froze, her heart pounding. She set down her spoon and moved cautiously toward her front window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. In the dim glow of the streetlight, she could see her mailbox lying on the ground, ripped clean from its post. A figure in a dark hoodie was running down the street, disappearing around the corner. "Oh my Lord!" she gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She hesitated at her front door, then steeled herself and opened it. Standing on her porch, she surveyed the damage. Her sturdy metal mailbox, the one her late husband had installed 15 years ago, lay dented and twisted on the sidewalk. Its wooden post had been snapped in half, splinters scattered across her lawn. A neighbor's porch light flicked on. Mrs. Parker from across the street called out, "Evelyn, you all right over there?" "Someone broke my mailbox," Evelyn called back, her voice shaking. "Did you see who it was?" "Just saw someone running off. Looked like one of those teenagers from over on Maple." Evelyn went back inside and picked up her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed the non-emergency police number. A bored-sounding dispatcher answered. "Police department." "Yes, hello. I'd like to report vandalism to my property," Evelyn explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "Someone just destroyed my mailbox." "Your address, ma'am?" 412 Willow Street. There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Your name?" "Evelyn Bird." Another pause, longer this time. "And you said this was about a mailbox?" "Yes. Someone ripped it right off the post. I'm a senior citizen and—" "Ma'am, we can take a report. But honestly, vandalism like this is usually just kids. We probably won't be able to do much." Evelyn frowned. "But I just saw the person running away. If an officer came now—" "We're short-staffed tonight, Mrs. Bird. I can have someone drive by tomorrow to take a report if you'd like." The dismissive tone in the dispatcher's voice made Evelyn's stomach tighten. "Yes, please do that. We'll try to have someone there tomorrow afternoon." After hanging up, Evelyn returned to her cooling soup. She ate mechanically, no longer tasting the food. Her thoughts raced. Was it really just teenagers? The timing seemed too perfect, just hours after her humiliation at the bank. She washed her dishes and settled in her living room with a book she couldn't focus on. Every passing car made her glance up at the window. At just past 8 o'clock, a patrol car cruised slowly past her house. Even through the curtains, she recognized Officer Maddox behind the wheel. He wasn't driving normally. He was crawling past, head turned toward her home. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She switched off her reading lamp and moved to the window, peering carefully through a tiny gap in the curtains. The patrol car reached the end of the block, made a U-turn, and drove past her house again. Even slower this time. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself. "This isn't right at all." She double-checked her locks before going to bed early, exhaustion from the stressful day finally catching up with her. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of handcuffs and sneering faces. A sharp crack against her front window jolted her awake. Evelyn sat up in bed, heart hammering. The bedside clock read 9:30 p.m. Another crack, followed by a splattering sound. She hurried to her window and peeked out, just in time to see a car speeding away. No lights, just taillights disappearing down the street. Evelyn didn't turn on any lights. Instead, she moved cautiously through her darkened house to the front door. When she opened it, the smell hit her immediately, the sulfuric stench of broken eggs. Her porch was a mess. Raw eggs dripped down her front door, smeared across her welcome mat, and splattered on the porch railings. At least half a dozen had been thrown. She closed the door quietly, leaning against it. No point calling the police again. It was clear now, they weren't coming to help her. Sleep was impossible after that. Evelyn sat in her darkened living room until dawn broke, jumping at every sound from outside. When morning light finally filtered through her curtains, she opened the front door to assess the damage in daylight. The egg had begun to dry, creating a crusty, yellowish mess all over her porch. And there, stuck prominently to her door with clear tape, was an official-looking notice she hadn't seen in the darkness. Citation: Lawn height violation, it read in bold letters. City Code 32.4b. Grass exceeding 8 inches. Fine, $150. Officer issuing citation, B. Maddox. Evelyn stared at the paper, then at her lawn. It had been mowed just 5 days ago by the neighborhood boy she hired. It was nowhere near 8 inches high. "This is because of yesterday," she whispered, finally understanding. "They're punishing me." She began scrubbing the eggs off her porch with a determination born of anger rather than fear. By the time she finished an hour later, her arms ached, but her porch was mostly clean. Just as she dumped the dirty water from her bucket, the distinctive rumble of a motorcycle approached. Big Red pulled up to her curb, his massive bike gleaming in the morning sun. He killed the engine and climbed off, his expression changing from friendly to concerned as he took in her worn appearance. "Miss Evelyn? You all right?" Evelyn hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I don't think I am." She invited him in and made fresh coffee. As they sat at her kitchen table, she told him everything. Marisol's call, the smashed mailbox, the patrol car driving by, the eggs, and the bogus citation. Big Red's face darkened with each detail. His massive hands tightened around the coffee mug until Evelyn worried it might crack. "This ain't random," he finally said. "This is them sending a message." "That's what I think too," Evelyn admitted. "But what am I supposed to do? I can't fight the police." Big Red set down his mug with a decisive thunk. "No, but we can watch over you." He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Knuckles, get the guys together. Miss Evelyn's being harassed." "Yeah, that cop from yesterday." He listened for a moment. "Yeah, I thought you'd feel that way. I'm at her place now." Within an hour, 4 motorcycles were parked outside Evelyn's house. The riders, Big Red, Knuckles, Stitch, and a woman Evelyn hadn't met before named Ramona, gathered in her living room. Their leather vests and tattoos looked out of place among her floral-patterned furniture and cross-stitched Bible verses on the wall. "We're setting up shifts," Big Red explained. "Someone will ride by every hour. Different bikes, different riders, so they don't catch on too quick." "You don't have to do this," Evelyn protested. "With respect, ma'am, we do," Stitch said firmly. He was the youngest of the group, with kind eyes that contrasted with his intimidating appearance. "Those officers are abusing their power, and that ain't right." "We take care of our own," Ramona added, her voice gentle despite her tough exterior. "And like it or not, you're one of ours now." As the day progressed, Evelyn watched from her window as different motorcycles cruised past her house at regular intervals. The neighbors noticed, too, curtains twitching up and down the street. Mrs. Parker called once to make sure Evelyn was okay. Her voice tinged with concern about those bikers hanging around. By evening, Evelyn felt safer than she had since the incident at the bank. The bikers had fixed her mailbox, reattaching it to a new post they'd bought at the hardware store. Stitch had even mowed her lawn. though it hardly needed it. As darkness fell, Big Red returned for the night watch. He positioned his motorcycle at the end of Evelyn's street, partially hidden by the shadow of a large oak tree. From her window, Evelyn could see his silhouette, broad-shouldered and vigilant, the motorcycle's engine rumbling softly as he kept watch over her home. The sight brought tears to her eyes, not of fear or sadness this time, but of gratitude. For the first time since her handcuffs had been removed, she felt truly protected. Monday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through Evelyn's kitchen curtains. She sat at her small wooden table, sipping tea and trying to ease the lingering ache in her wrists. The weekend's events still weighed heavily on her mind. The mail slot clicked, and envelopes dropped onto the floor. Evelyn sighed, set down her mug, and shuffled to retrieve them. Bills, advertisements, and an official-looking envelope from Stonebrook Federal Bank. Her stomach tightened. With shaky fingers, she opened the envelope and unfolded the crisp letter inside. "Dear Ms. Bird," she read aloud, "we regret to inform you that your account has been flagged for unusual activity and temporarily frozen pending review." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. The room seemed to tilt sideways. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The phone rang, startling her. She answered with a trembling, "Hello? Miss Evelyn, it's Big Red. Just checking in on you this morning." Evelyn's voice cracked as she explained the letter. "They've frozen my account. I won't be able to support my granddaughter." A long pause followed. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, Big Red said, his voice hard as steel. True to his word, engines rumbled outside Evelyn's house exactly 20 minutes later. "Let me see that," Big Red said gently, taking the paper. His eyes narrowed as he read. "This is garbage," he muttered. "Pure garbage. They're punishing you." Stitch, a tall man with silver-streaked beard and steady hands, nodded. "You need to go down there and set this straight." "I don't know if I can face them again," Evelyn admitted. Knuckles, his arms crossed over his broad chest, shook his head. "You won't face them alone, Miss Evelyn. Not this time. Not ever again." 40 minutes later, the unusual procession arrived at Stonebrook Federal Bank. Evelyn, dressed in her Sunday best, a lavender skirt suit and small pearl earrings, walked with her head high. 4 leather-clad bikers flanked her, their faces serious, boots heavy on the pavement. As they approached the entrance, Frank Dillard appeared at the glass doors, his face flushing red. He pushed outside, blocking the entrance. "Ms. Bird, you're welcome to come in, but these gentlemen need to wait outside." Big Red stepped forward. "We're her escort." Frank's nostrils flared. "This is a professional establishment. We have policies." "It's all right," Evelyn interrupted, touching Big Red's arm. "I can handle this part. You boys wait right here where I can see you." The bikers exchanged glances, then nodded. "We'll be right here, watching through those windows," Big Red said loudly enough for Frank to hear. Tinker added, "Every move, every word." Evelyn squared her shoulders and followed Frank inside. The bank was nearly empty. A few customers looked up, recognizing her from Friday's scene. Whispers followed her to the manager's desk. Frank sat down, smoothing his tie. "Now, Ms. Bird, about your account. Why has it been frozen?" Evelyn asked directly. Frank's smile was thin. "Security reasons. We noticed unusual withdrawal attempts. The only unusual thing was being arrested for trying to access my own money," Evelyn said. "That was unfortunate. But our fraud detection system has flagged your account. Nothing I can do." Frank shrugged, a small smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Bank policy. How long will it take to clear up?" Evelyn asked, her heart sinking. "Hard to say. Could be days. Could be weeks." Through the window, Evelyn could see the bikers watching intently. Their presence gave her strength. From the corner of her eye, Evelyn noticed Marisol, the young teller who had called her. She was pretending to organize papers while listening. "Let me speak with someone else," Evelyn demanded. "I'm the manager, Ms. Bird." "There is no one else?" Evelyn stood up. "Then I'll speak to your supervisor at the regional office." Frank's smile vanished. "Sit down, Ms. Bird. Making a scene won't help your situation." Outside, the bikers tensed, watching Frank's face harden. "I'm not making a scene," Evelyn said clearly. "I'm asking about my money." "Which you can't access until we complete our review," Frank snapped. "Now if you're done wasting my time—" "Mr. Dillard," came a soft voice. Marisol had approached the desk. "Ms. Bird has a call on line 2. Frank frowned. "She can take it at the courtesy phone." Marisol led Evelyn to a phone near the back. When they were out of earshot, she whispered quickly, "There's no call. I just needed to tell you, Frank personally flagged your account this morning. He put a fraud alert on it right after opening. I heard him laughing about it with Ryan." Evelyn's chest tightened. "Why would he do that?" "He said he was teaching a lesson about respect." Marisol's eyes darted nervously toward Frank's desk. "I could lose my job for telling you this." "Thank you, honey," Evelyn whispered. "I won't forget this." When she returned to Frank's desk, her eyes were sharp with newfound clarity. "I'll be back," she said simply. And not alone. Outside, the bikers surrounded her as she explained what Marisol had told her. Their faces darkened with anger. "That's targeted harassment," Stitch said. "Plain as day." They escorted her to their bikes, but as they prepared to leave, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot. Officer Maddox stepped out, adjusting his belt. "Let's go," Big Red muttered. "No sense poking that bear today." They rode in formation back toward Evelyn's neighborhood. At a red light, Knuckles noticed the same police cruiser following them. When they split up, Evelyn riding with Big Red while the others took different routes home, the cruiser followed Knuckles. Flashing lights appeared in his mirror. Knuckles pulled over, keeping his hands visible on the handlebars. Officer Maddox approached, hand resting on his holster. "License and registration." "What's the problem, officer?" Knuckles asked calmly. "Broken tail light." Maddox's grin didn't reach his eyes. Knuckles knew his tail light was perfect. He'd checked all his lights just yesterday. But he handed over his documents without argument. Maddox took his time writing a ticket, then leaned in close as he handed it over. "Stay out of Stonebrook business," he said quietly. "You bikers think you run this town?" "You don't. We do." "Just helping a friend," Knuckles replied evenly. "Your friend should know better than to cause trouble." Maddox tapped the ticket book against his palm. "Next time, it won't just be a ticket." Tuesday afternoon, sunshine filtered through Evelyn's lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across her dining room table. 4 leather-clad bikers hunched uncomfortably in her small wooden chairs, looking oddly out of place among her flowered placemats and china teacups. "Start from the beginning, Miss Evelyn," Big Red said gently. "Every detail matters." For the next hour, she recounted every moment: the suspicious teller, Frank's dismissive treatment, the officer's aggression, the handcuffs biting into her wrists. She described the phone call from Marisol, the vandalism, and yesterday's account freeze. Stitch's pen moved rapidly across his notepad. "This is textbook harassment," he muttered. "And discrimination," Knuckles added, his voice a low rumble. Tinker, who had been quiet, suddenly perked up. "You know what?" he said, reaching for his phone. "We have more evidence than they realize." He tapped at his screen, then turned it toward Evelyn. The video showed her outside the bank, handcuffed, with Officer Maddox roughly guiding her toward the squad car. "Our helmet cameras," Tinker explained with a hint of pride. "Most of us wear them for safety on the road. I caught the whole thing from the moment they brought you outside." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth as she watched herself on the tiny screen. Small, frightened, helpless. And I've got footage from inside, Stitch added. When we walked you back in, got a clear shot of Frank's face when he realized we weren't going away. Big Red nodded thoughtfully. This is good. Real good. He turned to Evelyn. Miss Evelyn, have you ever heard of Samuel Givens? She shook her head. Civil rights attorney. Handled cases like yours before. Got offices downtown. Big Red's voice softened. My sister cleaned houses for his family years back. Said he was good people. Fair? A lawyer? Evelyn hesitated. I don't have money for... Cases like this, Stitch interrupted, they usually work on contingency. Means you don't pay unless you win. Win what? Evelyn asked. Justice, Knuckles said simply. They spent the next hour organizing a timeline of events. Stitch taped a large sheet of paper to Evelyn's wall, marking each incident with precise dates and times. Tinker downloaded the videos onto Evelyn's old laptop, creating backup copies. We need more, Big Red said finally. Need to catch them in their own words. Like how? Evelyn asked. Knuckles pulled out a small device from his pocket. Record your calls. Legal in this state with one-party consent. Means only one person on the call needs to know it's being recorded. That person would be you. Evelyn stared at the recorder. You want me to trap them? Want you to protect yourself, Big Red corrected. Truth ain't a trap, Miss Evelyn. Tinker stood suddenly. I'll be back in 20. Got something at my place that might help. While they waited, Stitch helped Evelyn practice using the recorder. They made test calls to each other, learning how to activate it discreetly. Call the bank, Stitch suggested. Ask about your account again. See what they say when they don't know they're being recorded. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she dialed. The call connected to customer service, who transferred her to Frank's office. Ms. Bird? Frank's voice oozed false politeness. I told you yesterday. Your account remains under review. How long will this take? Evelyn asked, her voice stronger than she felt. I need access to my money. As I explained, our fraud detection system has flagged unusual activity. Nothing I can do about bank policy. Is there anything I can provide to speed this up? A pause. People like you would be better off using those check-cashing places instead of proper banks. Less paperwork for everyone. Evelyn's breath caught. What do you mean? People like me? I think we're done here, Ms. Bird. The line went dead. Stitch gave her a thumbs up. Got it all. That people like you comment? Gold. Tinker returned with a laptop and small printer. Let's type up statements while everything's fresh. They worked through the afternoon. Evelyn called Marisol, who agreed to provide a written statement about Frank's comments, though she feared for her job. Tinker assured her they could meet discreetly. By late afternoon, they had assembled an impressive collection of evidence: video footage, recorded calls, witness statements, photographs of Evelyn's bruised wrists, the bank letter, and the bogus citation. Wednesday morning arrived with a clarity Evelyn hadn't felt in days. She stood before her bathroom mirror, carefully applying a touch of pink lipstick and securing her silver hair with pearl-tipped pins. Today wasn't about looking her best. It was about reclaiming her dignity. Somebody's coming for you, Miss Evelyn, Mrs. Parker called from next door. Sounds like a motorcycle parade. Evelyn smiled as she peered through her curtains. 4 motorcycles rumbled to a stop in front of her house, their chrome parts gleaming in the morning sun. Big Red dismounted first, removing his helmet and smoothing his beard before approaching her door. Morning, Miss Evelyn, he said when she opened it. You ready? She nodded, clutching the evidence binder to her chest like a shield. As ready as I'll ever be. Got a surprise for you, Knuckles said, gesturing toward a sleek black car pulling up behind the motorcycles. Figured you might not want to ride on the back of a bike to meet a lawyer. My cousin's car, Stitch explained. He's letting us borrow it for the day. Evelyn's shoulders relaxed. That's thoughtful of you boys. The drive downtown took 20 minutes. Evelyn sat in the back seat with the binder on her lap, watching through the window as the bikers formed a protective convoy around them. People on the sidewalk stopped to stare at the unusual procession. "Never thought I'd have an escort like this at my age," Evelyn murmured, half to herself. Big Red, who rode alongside her window, glanced over and grinned. Givens' law offices occupied the second floor of a red brick building on Main Street. The modest sign in the window simply read, "Samuel Givens, Attorney at Law, Civil Rights, Employment Discrimination, Police Misconduct." Inside, the reception area was small but well-maintained. Framed newspaper articles lined the walls, each highlighting various civil rights victories. A young woman at the front desk looked up, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Evelyn flanked by 4 imposing bikers. "We have an appointment with Mr. Givens," Big Red said. "For Evelyn Bird." The receptionist smiled warmly. "Yes, he's expecting you. Please go right in." Samuel Givens stood as they entered, coming around his desk to greet them. He was a dignified black man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a crisp navy suit with no tie, giving him an approachable but professional appearance. "Ms. Bird," he said, taking Evelyn's hand in both of his. "I'm Samuel Givens. Big Red told me a little about your situation when he called yesterday. I'm very sorry for what you've been through." His voice carried a gentle authority that immediately put Evelyn at ease. He guided her to a comfortable chair, then nodded respectfully to the bikers. "Gentlemen, thank you for bringing Ms. Bird to me. You're welcome to stay if that's what she wants." "They stay," Evelyn said firmly. "They're the only reason I'm here at all." Givens nodded and returned to his seat. "Then, let's begin. Tell me what happened, in your own words." For the third time, Evelyn recounted her ordeal. This time, her voice was steadier, her words more precise. She described the incident at the bank, the unnecessary force, the frozen account, and the ongoing harassment. Givens listened intently, occasionally jotting notes but mostly maintaining eye contact. When she finished, he gestured to the binder. "May I?" Evelyn handed it over. Givens flipped through the carefully organized evidence, his expression growing more troubled with each page. When Tinker produced a USB drive with the helmet camera footage, Givens plugged it into his computer and watched in silence. The video clearly showed Evelyn being roughly handcuffed, her small frame dwarfed by the officers. Her pained expression was visible when Maddox twisted her arm. "Stop the video," Givens said sharply. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "This is one of the clearest cases of misconduct I've seen in years." He replayed parts of the footage, pausing occasionally to make notes. "The excessive force is undeniable. And the recorded calls with the bank manager." He shook his head. "Ms. Bird, you have grounds for multiple causes of action here." "What does that mean exactly?" Evelyn asked. Givens leaned forward, counting off on his fingers. "Wrongful arrest, excessive force, financial discrimination, elder abuse, retaliation." He tapped his pen against the desk. "We're looking at a civil rights lawsuit against both the police department and the bank." "A lawsuit?" Evelyn's voice wavered. "I just want them to leave me alone." "That's exactly why we need to file," Givens explained gently. "This won't stop until they're held accountable. These institutions respond to consequences, not appeals to conscience." Big Red shifted in his chair. "Tell her about the money part?" Givens nodded. "I work on contingency for cases like this. That means you don't pay me unless we win or settle. If we do, I'll take a percentage of the award." "I don't care about money," Evelyn said firmly. "It's not just about money," Givens replied. "It's about accountability. It's about making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." Evelyn fell silent, considering his words. "Would I have to testify?" she finally asked. "In court? Possibly," Givens admitted. "But with this evidence, especially the video and recordings, there's a good chance they'll want to settle before trial." Evelyn looked at Big Red, then at the other bikers who had stood by her through this nightmare. Their faces reflected the same resolve she felt growing inside her. "What's the first step?" she asked. Givens smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. "First, you sign my representation agreement. Then we file formal complaints with the State Attorney General's office, the Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, and the Banking Commission." He produced a document and explained each section carefully. Evelyn listened, asking questions when something wasn't clear. Finally, she took the pen he offered. Her signature was steady and deliberate. "Today," Givens said, standing, "we start fighting back." The next 3 hours were a blur of activity. They drove to the state office building, where Givens helped Evelyn file formal complaints with multiple agencies. The bikers remained by her side, a silent, imposing presence that turned heads throughout the building. Each time Evelyn signed her name to an official complaint, she felt a little stronger, a little taller. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. "You know," Stitch said, as they left the Attorney General's office, "you're probably the toughest person I've ever met, Miss Evelyn." She laughed softly. "At 74, you learn that being quiet doesn't always mean being safe." By late afternoon, exhaustion began to catch up with her. Givens noticed her fatigue and suggested they call it a day. "We've made a strong start," he assured her. "I'll begin drafting the formal lawsuit tomorrow. In the meantime, continue documenting any further harassment." Back at Evelyn's house, the bikers insisted on checking her property before leaving. Tinker fixed a loose porch step, while Stitch helped bring in groceries they'd picked up on the way home. "We'll keep riding by," Big Red promised. "Different times, so they never know when we're watching." Evelyn thanked them, her gratitude beyond words. After they left, she stood in her kitchen, the house quiet once more. She removed Samuel Givens's business card from her purse and placed it on her refrigerator, securing it with a magnet shaped like a teapot. There it would stay, a reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. A reminder that standing up for yourself wasn't just right. It was necessary. Evelyn made herself a cup of tea and sank into her favorite chair by the window. For the first time in days, she felt something like peace. Whatever came next, she would face it with her head held high. Thursday evening had settled around Evelyn's small house like a soft blanket. After dinner, she'd spent several hours organizing papers for her meeting with Attorney Givens tomorrow. The day had been quiet. No police cruisers rolling by, no nasty phone calls, just blessed peace. At 11:15 p.m., Evelyn moved through her nightly routine. She washed her face, brushed her teeth, and changed into her favorite blue cotton nightgown. Her joints ached more than usual, a combination of stress and the slight chill in the air. "Just one more check before bed," she murmured to herself. Evelyn shuffled into the living room, leaning on her cane. She reached for the curtains, her fingers grasping the worn fabric that had hung there for almost 20 years. As she pulled them closed, she caught a glimpse of the empty street beyond. The neighborhood was silent, houses dark except for porch lights. In the distance, she could see Big Red's motorcycle parked under a streetlight 3 houses down, a comforting sentinel. She smiled slightly. Those boys. Never would she have imagined bikers becoming her guardian angels. Yet there they were, keeping watch in shifts, making sure she was safe. Evelyn turned away from the window, satisfied that all was secure. She switched off the table lamp, plunging the room into darkness lit only by the soft glow from the hallway. The shattering of glass exploded through the silence. Evelyn screamed, instinctively dropping to the floor as something heavy crashed into her living room. Glass fragments sprayed across her carpet and coffee table. Cold night air rushed through the broken window. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. Then training from decades of raising children in sometimes rough neighborhoods kicked in. "Stay down," she whispered to herself. "Just stay down." She crawled toward the hallway, her knees scraping against glass shards. The Ring doorbell she'd installed yesterday, at Stitch's insistence, would have sent alerts to both her phone and Big Red's. Reaching the hallway, she pulled herself up using the wall for support. Her phone sat on the side table. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911. "Emergency services. What's your—" "Someone threw something through my window," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "I'm an elderly woman living alone. Please hurry." The dispatcher asked for her address. As Evelyn gave it, she heard the distinctive rumble of motorcycles growing louder outside. "Ma'am, officers are on their way. Are you somewhere safe?" "Yes," Evelyn replied, relief washing over her as she heard boots on her porch. "My friends are here now." She disconnected and shuffled toward the front door. Through the peephole, she could see Big Red's massive frame, his face a mask of concern. "Miss Evelyn?" His voice boomed from outside. "It's Big Red and the boys. You okay in there?" "I'm coming," she called back, hands still shaking as she undid the locks. The moment the door opened, Big Red stepped inside, followed by Knuckles and Tinker. They moved with surprising grace for such large men, immediately assessing the situation. "Are you hurt?" Big Red asked, scanning her from head to toe. "No, I'm just shaken up," Evelyn said. Her eyes drifted toward the living room where glass glittered under the hallway light. "Someone threw something through my window." Knuckles moved carefully into the living room, switching on the lights. "It's a brick," he confirmed, crouching down to examine it. "There's something tied to it." He carefully untied a piece of paper wrapped around the brick with rough twine. His expression darkened as he read the message. "What does it say?" Evelyn asked, though part of her already knew. Knuckles handed the note to Big Red, who read it aloud. "Drop the case, or else." The words hung in the air like poison. Evelyn felt her knees weaken. Big Red guided her to a chair in the kitchen, away from the glass. "Tinker, check the back of the house," Big Red ordered. "Knuckles, sweep the front yard. I called Stitch. He's on his way." The men moved immediately, Tinker heading toward the back door while Knuckles stepped outside to search the perimeter. "They know," Evelyn whispered, staring at the note in Big Red's hand. "They know about the lawsuit." "We figured they might," Big Red said gently. "But this," he held up the note, "this means they're scared." "You've got them worried, Miss Evelyn." Evelyn didn't feel empowered by that knowledge. She felt terrified. These people had shown they wouldn't stop at threats. They had escalated to violence. Tinker burst back through the door, his face alarmed. "Red, come quick!" Big Red moved to the back door, Evelyn following despite his gesture for her to stay put. What she saw made her heart stop. A bright orange glow illuminated her backyard. Her small garden shed, where she kept tools, flower pots, and cherished photos she couldn't fit in the house, was engulfed in flames. "No!" she cried out. The fire crackled hungrily, consuming the wooden structure. Sparks flew into the night air, drifting dangerously toward the back of her house. "Tinker, get the hose!" Big Red shouted, already running toward the shed. "Knuckles!" "Back here now!" Stitch's motorcycle roared into the driveway at that moment. He leaped off, taking in the scene in an instant. He grabbed a garden hose coiled near the back porch and turned the spigot to full blast. The bikers worked with practiced efficiency. Stitch aimed the hose at the base of the flames, while Big Red and Knuckles used shovels from Evelyn's garden to throw dirt onto the fire. Tinker stationed himself between the shed and the house, beating back any sparks that drifted too close with a wet blanket he'd grabbed from somewhere. Evelyn stood frozen on her back porch, watching as her world burned. The shed contained so many memories: her late husband's fishing gear, her grandchildren's artwork from when they were small, photo albums she'd been meaning to bring inside. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. The bikers fought the fire with grim determination. Water hissed against flames. Steam and smoke billowed into the night sky. Gradually, the orange glow diminished, replaced by smoldering ruins and the acrid smell of burnt wood. The fire was contained before it could reach her house, but the shed was destroyed. Everything inside it, gone. Something inside Evelyn broke. After days of holding herself together, of fighting back, of being brave, this final violation was too much. Her knees buckled, and she sank down onto the porch steps, tears flowing freely down her lined face. "Why?" she sobbed, her thin shoulders shaking. "Why are they doing this to me?" Big Red was by her side in an instant, his massive arm around her shoulders, surprisingly gentle. "Because they're cowards," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because you scared them by standing up. Because they think they can make you back down." Flashing lights illuminated the front of the house as police cars arrived. Knuckles went to meet them, explaining the situation. "I can't do this anymore," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible over the commotion. "I just wanted to live in peace." "Miss Evelyn," Big Red said, looking directly into her tear-filled eyes, "we are not leaving your side again. Not for 1 minute." Stitch approached, face grim beneath his bandana. "Police want statements. They're treating it as arson." The next hour passed in a blur. Police took photographs and statements. Fire department personnel ensured the fire was completely extinguished. Neighbors gathered on the street, watching. By 2:30 a.m., the officials had finally left. The broken window was covered with a piece of plywood that Tinker had found in his truck. The shed was a blackened skeleton against the night sky. Evelyn lay on her couch, wrapped in a quilt, too afraid to sleep in her bedroom. Her eyes were red from crying, her body exhausted, but her mind racing. Outside, Big Red sat on his motorcycle under the streetlight. The engine was off, but his presence was unmistakable. A guardian keeping watch. Knuckles was stationed at her back door, while Stitch and Tinker patrolled the perimeter of her property. Through her temporary window covering, Evelyn could see Big Red's silhouette. Solid, immovable, protective. She closed her eyes, finding a small measure of comfort in knowing she wasn't alone. The night stretched on, quiet but no longer peaceful. Friday morning arrived with harsh clarity. The sunrise cast an unforgiving light on Evelyn's backyard, revealing the full extent of the damage. What had once been her cherished garden shed was now a charred skeleton, blackened beams pointing accusingly toward the sky. Piles of ash and debris marked where precious memories had been stored. Evelyn stood on her back porch, a mug of untouched tea cooling in her hands. She hadn't slept more than an hour all night. Her eyes were swollen, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion and grief. "Miss Evelyn?" Stitch appeared beside her, his normally gruff voice gentled. "You should eat something. I made some toast." She nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the ruins. "That shed held all my husband's fishing gear. His favorite hat was in there. And my grandchildren's first drawings." Her voice cracked. Stitch placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry." Movement at the fence line caught their attention. Mrs. Geraldine Parker, Evelyn's neighbor for 15 years, stood at the gate, her face etched with concern. Behind her, several other neighbors had gathered. "Evelyn! Good Lord! What happened?" Mrs. Parker called, pushing open the gate without waiting for an answer. She hurried across the yard, ignoring the imposing figure of Stitch beside Evelyn. Soon, Evelyn's backyard filled with neighbors. Mr. Ruiz from across the street, the Torres family from 2 doors down, elderly couples who had lived in the neighborhood as long as Evelyn herself, young families who had moved in more recently. "We heard the sirens last night," Mrs. Parker said, her arm around Evelyn's shoulders. "Then Mary Thompson called saying there was a fire at your place." "Someone did this on purpose," Mr. Ruiz said, examining the remains of the shed with knowing eyes. He had worked as a contractor before retiring. "This wasn't no accident." Evelyn nodded, too tired to hold back the truth anymore. "It's because I filed a complaint against the police and the bank." The words hung in the morning air. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of backing away, her neighbors moved closer. "What complaint?" asked Mrs. Torres, her accent thickening with anger. "What did they do to you?" The story spilled out of Evelyn then. The humiliating arrest at the bank, the racist treatment, the harassment that followed. As she spoke, more neighbors arrived, passing through the gate and joining the growing circle around her. The bikers stood respectfully to the side, allowing this community moment to unfold. "That Officer Maddox arrested my son last year for just sitting in his car," said Mr. Washington, an elderly man who rarely spoke at neighborhood gatherings. "Said he looked suspicious. Boy was just waiting for his girlfriend to finish her shift at the grocery. The bank refused my loan application 3 times, added Mr. Torres. No reason. My credit is good. But Frank Dillard, he always has excuses." One by one, similar stories emerged. What had begun as neighbors checking on Evelyn transformed into an impromptu community meeting. Big Red watched from the porch steps, a rare smile creasing his weathered face. A stocky, gray-haired man pushed through the crowd. Ed Ramsey, who had retired from the Stonebrook Police Department 5 years earlier. "Miss Bird," he said, removing his cap. "I worked with Maddox for 3 years before I retired. That man has had 7 complaints filed against him, all of them buried." His eyes were steady and apologetic. "I should have spoken up sooner, but I'm speaking now, and I'll put it in writing for you." Reverend Jackson from Evelyn's church arrived, his tall figure parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. "Evelyn," he said, taking her hands in his, "this can't stand. Not in our community. Not to one of our elders." He looked around at the gathered neighbors. "Church Hall, 6 o'clock tonight. We need to organize." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. As the neighbors dispersed with promises to return that evening, Mrs. Parker stayed behind, helping Evelyn inside to rest before the meeting. The bikers continued their protective watch, rotating shifts so there was always someone present. "You know," Big Red said as Evelyn settled onto her couch for a nap, "I think we underestimated this neighborhood." Evelyn smiled tiredly. People here have been fighting quiet battles their whole lives. They know when it's time to speak up. The community hall of Greater Hope Baptist Church buzzed with voices that evening. Every pew was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the vestibule. Evelyn sat in the front row beside Samuel Givens, who had arrived early to prepare. The Hells Angels entered as a group, their leather vests and tattoos standing in stark contrast to the Sunday best many church members wore. A hush fell momentarily. Then Reverend Jackson welcomed them warmly, directing them to seats in the back. "Brothers and sisters," the Reverend began once everyone had settled, "we are gathered tonight because one of our own has been wronged. But as we've learned, Sister Evelyn's experience is not unique." He invited Evelyn to speak first. She stood slowly, her cane steady against the floor, and faced her community. The words came easier this time, bolstered by the supportive nods and murmurs of agreement from the crowd. When she finished, others rose to speak. A young Latino man described being followed through stores by Officer Harlan. An elderly woman explained how Frank Dillard had questioned the source of her pension checks when she tried to deposit them. A teenage boy recounted being stopped and searched by Officer Maddox while walking home from basketball practice. The stories continued for over an hour. Samuel Givens took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. The faces of the community members reflected anger, pain, and, most importantly, resolve. Finally, Samuel stood to address the gathering. "What we're seeing here is a pattern," he explained, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "Not isolated incidents, but systematic mistreatment of this community. Mrs. Bird's case gives us a starting point, but each of your testimonies strengthens our position." He looked around the room. "I need volunteers to give formal statements. With enough evidence, we can push for a broader investigation." Hands shot up across the room. Samuel's assistant moved through the crowd, collecting contact information from those willing to testify. "This won't be quick or easy," Samuel cautioned. "The system protects its own. But together, with one voice, we can demand accountability." From the back of the room, Big Red stood. His massive frame drew all eyes. "The Angels will provide security for anyone who feels unsafe after coming forward," he announced. "No one touches this community again." A ripple of approval moved through the crowd. Reverend Jackson called Evelyn forward once more. She made her way slowly to the altar, where she had sung in the choir for decades and helped serve communion to generations of worshipers. She looked out at the sea of faces, Black families who had lived in Stonebrook for generations, Latino immigrants who had more recently made it their home, the leather-clad bikers who had become unexpected allies, and even a few white residents from the better side of town who had come in solidarity. "I was afraid," Evelyn admitted, her voice steady despite her fatigue. "When they put those handcuffs on me, I felt so small. When they vandalized my home, I wanted to give up." She straightened her shoulders. "But I'm not small. We're not small. Together, we're mighty." A chorus of amen rose from the congregation. "Miss Evelyn won't stand alone," Reverend Jackson declared, taking her hand. "Who stands with her?" The entire room rose as one, a forest of raised hands and determined faces. For the first time since the nightmare began, Evelyn felt the weight lifting from her shoulders. The path ahead would not be easy, but she would not walk it alone. The community that had quietly endured for so long had found its voice and its courage. Saturday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through Evelyn's freshly repaired window. The glass company had come early, working quickly to replace what the brick had shattered. Now her living room was transformed into an impromptu war room. Samuel Givens spread files across her dining table, his suit jacket draped over a chair. 3 laptops hummed, surrounded by stacks of legal pads and folders. Evelyn sat in her armchair, a cup of tea cooling beside her as she watched the activity with quiet determination. The bikers had arrived promptly at 8, filing in respectfully and taking positions around the room. Big Red stood near the window, occasionally glancing outside at the quiet street. Knuckles sat cross-legged on the floor, organizing printed testimonies into neat piles. Stitch had brought coffee and pastries for everyone, now arranged on the kitchen counter. "The timing is critical," Samuel explained, gesturing to a calendar. "We'll file the civil rights lawsuit on Monday morning. That gives us the weekend to prepare everything." Evelyn nodded, her back straighter than it had been all week. "What do you need from me today, Mr. Givens?" "Your official statement, recorded and notarized." He pointed to a small video camera set up on a tripod. "Every detail you can remember, from the moment you walked into that bank until now." Tinker approached with his laptop. "I've got the helmet cam footage ready to transfer. You won't believe how clear it is." He turned the screen toward Samuel, who let out a low whistle. "Perfect angle of the arrest," Samuel muttered, adjusting his glasses. "Shows the excessive force clear as day." Mrs. Parker arrived with a plate of sandwiches, slipping in through the back door as naturally as if she lived there. She'd appointed herself Evelyn's unofficial caretaker since the fire. "You need to eat," she told Evelyn firmly. "Can't fight City Hall on an empty stomach." Samuel's assistant, a young woman named Janelle, began setting up a makeshift recording station in the corner of the living room. "Mrs. Bird, whenever you're ready, we'll start your statement." Evelyn smoothed her dress and took a deep breath. "I'm ready now." The room quieted as Janelle positioned the camera. Samuel sat across from Evelyn with a legal pad. "Please state your name and address for the record," he began gently. "Evelyn Marie Bird, 1423 Maple Street, Stonebrook." "Mrs. Bird, please tell us, in your own words, what happened last Friday at Stonebrook Federal Bank." Evelyn's voice was steady as she recounted every detail. The suspicious looks from Ryan Keller, Frank Dillard's dismissive attitude, the rough handling by Officers Maddox and Harlan. She described the pain of the handcuffs, the humiliation of being marched out in front of everyone. "And since that day, what has happened?" Samuel prompted. She detailed the vandalism, the fire, the threats. As she spoke, her voice grew stronger. The bikers listened silently, their faces hardening with each new detail. "Thank you, Mrs. Bird," Samuel said when she finished. "Your testimony is compelling and clear." A knock at the door interrupted them. Big Red moved to answer it, one hand hovering near his belt. Ed Ramsey stood on the porch with a thick manila envelope. "I brought what I promised," he said, stepping inside. "Personnel records I kept copies of before I retired. Shows the pattern of complaints against Maddox going back 5 years." Samuel accepted the envelope with raised eyebrows. "This could be crucial evidence, Mr. Ramsey." "Should have done it years ago," Ed said gruffly. "Better late than never." Throughout the morning, a steady stream of neighbors arrived. Some to give statements, others to drop off food or simply to check on Evelyn. Janelle recorded each testimony methodically, while Knuckles and Stitch helped elderly neighbors fill out written statement forms. Mr. Torres brought his teenage son Miguel to translate for Spanish-speaking residents who wanted to contribute their experiences. The boy worked diligently, carefully converting their words into precise English for Samuel's records. "We're building more than a case," Samuel observed quietly to Evelyn. "We're documenting a community's struggle." Around noon, Tinker burst through the front door, his face flushed. "They're making moves," he announced. "Frank Dillard is at the Wilsons' house down the street." Samuel frowned. "The Wilsons gave statements last night." "He's trying to get them to recant," Tinker confirmed, "offering to review their mortgage situation if they clarify what they said." Big Red started toward the door, but Evelyn raised her hand. "Wait, let me call Reverend Jackson first." Within 20 minutes, 5 church elders had gathered outside the Wilsons' home. They didn't say a word, just stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching. Frank Dillard emerged shortly after, his face red with frustration. He climbed into his Mercedes and sped away. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Maddox was having his own difficulties. He'd approached Marisol Rivera at the grocery store, cornering her by the produce section. "You should think hard about the consequences of lying about a bank manager," he'd told her, standing too close. "Immigration checks everyone these days." But he hadn't noticed the 3 Hells Angels members who had been following him since morning. Stitch stepped forward, phone recording. "Problem, officer?" he asked loudly, drawing the attention of other shoppers. Maddox backed away, muttering about routine inquiries. By mid-afternoon, the word had spread through Stonebrook's neighborhoods. Anyone approached by police or bank officials was to call a designated number immediately. The community had organized itself into a protective network. Harvey Collins, a Vietnam veteran who lived 3 doors down from Evelyn, parked his truck in front of her house and refused to leave. "Taking the first watch," he announced, a thermos of coffee in one hand. "Sir, we've got this covered," Knuckles assured him. "No offense to you boys," Harvey replied, settling into his seat, "but I've been watching over this street since before you were born." Inside, Samuel and Janelle continued processing statements. Tinker had transferred the helmet cam footage to multiple flash drives and cloud accounts for safekeeping. "We need to prepare for the press," Samuel told Evelyn. "Once we file on Monday, the media will be all over this. Are you ready for that?" Evelyn considered the question. A week ago, the idea would have terrified her. Now she nodded firmly. "If telling my story helps others, then yes, I'm ready." As evening fell, the crowd gradually dispersed. Samuel packed his files, promising to return Sunday afternoon for final preparations. The bikers set up their usual rotation, with Big Red taking the first night shift. Evelyn moved through her house, straightening cushions and washing teacups, her movements deliberate and calm. The fear that had paralyzed her earlier in the week had transformed into something else, a quiet resolve that steadied her hands and strengthened her spine. In her bedroom, she picked up a framed photograph from her dresser. James Byrd smiled back at her, his army uniform crisp, his expression proud. Her husband had been gone 15 years now, but she still talked to him every night. She placed the photo on her nightstand, angling it so his face caught the lamplight. "We're fighting back, James," she whispered, running her finger along the frame. "I'm not afraid anymore." Outside, she could hear the low rumble of Big Red's motorcycle as he circled the block. Inside, the house felt different, not just because of the day's activity, but because something had shifted within its walls. For the first time in years, Evelyn's home wasn't just a place of memories and quiet routines. It had become a fortress of resistance. Monday morning arrived with a gentle rain, washing the streets clean as if preparing the town for what was to come. Evelyn stood in front of her bedroom mirror, carefully pinning her silver hair. She had chosen her finest church dress, navy blue with white trim, and her good shoes despite their pinch. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. Today was the day she had been waiting for. A rumble of motorcycle engines grew louder outside her window. Through the curtains, she could see the Hells Angels arriving one by one, parking their bikes in perfect formation along the curb. Today, they had traded their usual leather vests for clean black leather jackets, their bikes freshly polished. The doorbell rang. Mrs. Parker stood on the porch, dressed in her Sunday best. "Ready to make history, Evelyn?" she asked with a smile. Evelyn nodded, picking up her handbag. More than ready. Outside, the street had transformed. At least 30 people were gathered. Church members, neighbors, former customers from the cafeteria where Evelyn had worked for decades. Ed Ramsey stood beside his old police cruiser, now a civilian vehicle but still commanding respect. Harvey Collins and 3 other veterans formed a loose honor guard. Big Red approached, extending his arm formally. "Your chariot awaits, Miss Evelyn." Instead of motorcycles, the bikers had arranged for a black SUV. "Can't have you getting wet today," Knuckles explained, opening the door. The procession to the courthouse was something Stonebrook had never seen before. The SUV led, followed by motorcycles, then a line of cars stretching back several blocks. As they passed through town, people stepped out of shops to watch. Some waved, others simply stared. At the courthouse steps, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. Samuel Givens waited at the entrance, briefcase in hand, his expression calm but determined. Beside him stood Janelle, clutching a stack of folders. "Quite the entrance, Mrs. Byrd," Samuel said with a smile. "Are you ready?" "Been ready all my life," Evelyn replied, straightening her back. The bikers flanked her as they climbed the courthouse steps. The community supporters formed a protective corridor behind them. Photographers from the local newspaper snapped pictures, and Evelyn noticed a television news van parked across the street. The marble halls of the county courthouse echoed with their footsteps. Unlike the police station or the bank, this place felt solemn, almost sacred in its promise of justice. Evelyn had never been inside a courtroom before. Courtroom 3 was already filling with spectators. Frank Dillard sat at the defense table with the bank's attorney, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit. Officer Maddox and Officer Harlan occupied another table with the police department's legal counsel, a balding man who kept checking his watch. Evelyn took her seat beside Samuel at the plaintiff's table. The bikers and community members filled the gallery behind them, a solid wall of support that made Maddox visibly uncomfortable. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge William Thornton presiding." Judge Thornton was an older white man with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. He surveyed the crowded courtroom with a slight frown. "I see we have quite an audience today," he noted. "Let me be clear, I'll have order in my courtroom. This is not a sporting event." He reviewed the docket briefly. Byrd versus Stonebrook Federal Bank and Stonebrook Police Department. Counselors, are you prepared to proceed? Samuel rose. "Yes, Your Honor." The defense attorneys echoed their readiness. "Mr. Givens, please present your opening statement," the judge directed. Samuel walked to the center of the courtroom, his posture straight, his voice clear and measured. "Your Honor, this case is about more than one incident or one individual. It is about a pattern of behavior that has been allowed to fester in our community. Mrs. Evelyn Byrd, a respected 74-year-old grandmother and lifelong resident of Stonebrook, went to her bank to withdraw her own money for her granddaughter's college expenses. What should have been a routine transaction became a nightmare of discrimination, false arrest, and subsequent retaliation. Samuel laid out the charges methodically: racial discrimination at the bank, false arrest by the police, elder abuse, intimidation, and financial retaliation. He explained how each charge was supported by substantial evidence, including video footage, audio recordings, and multiple witness testimonies. "We will demonstrate that not only was Mrs. Byrd mistreated, but that this mistreatment was part of a pattern of systemic discrimination that has affected many in our community. We seek not only damages for Mrs. Byrd, but accountability and structural changes to prevent such abuses in the future." The bank's attorney, Ms. Hartwell, countered with claims about standard security protocols and reasonable suspicion. The police department's lawyer, Mr. Donovan, emphasized the split-second decisions officers must make in potentially dangerous situations. Judge Thornton listened impassively, then turned to Samuel. "Call your first witness." The plaintiff calls Mrs. Evelyn Byrd. Evelyn walked to the witness stand with dignified steps, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. From this elevated position, she could see everyone in the courtroom: the stern judge, the nervous defendants, and the rows of supporters behind her. Samuel guided her through her testimony gently but thoroughly. Evelyn described the events at the bank in detail: the suspicious looks, the whispered phone call, the arrival of the police, the humiliation of being handcuffed. "And what happened after you were released?" Samuel asked. "They started coming after me," Evelyn replied, her voice steady. "My mailbox was smashed. My porch was egged. They put a freeze on my bank account. And then," her voice caught slightly, "someone set fire to my shed. Left a note telling me to drop the case." The judge's expression darkened. "Do you have evidence linking these acts to the defendants?" "Yes, Your Honor," Samuel interjected. "We'll present that evidence shortly." After Evelyn's testimony, Samuel called Marisol Rivera to the stand. The young bank teller approached nervously, her eyes darting toward Frank Dillard, who glared at her openly. "Ms. Rivera, please tell the court what you witnessed at Stonebrook Federal Bank on the day in question," Samuel prompted. Marisol took a deep breath. "Mr. Dillard, the manager, He saw Mrs. Bird and immediately made a face. When the teller called him over about the withdrawal, he said, "Why does one of these welfare grannies need that kind of cash?" Then he whispered to Ryan to call the police because these people were probably running some kind of scam. Objection. Ms. Hartwell stood up. Hearsay. Your Honor, Ms. Rivera was present and directly heard these statements as an employee, Samuel countered. Overruled, the judge decided. Continue, Ms. Rivera. Marisol described how Frank had made similar comments about other black customers, especially those making large withdrawals. He told us to always double-check their IDs, but he never said that about white customers. Next came the video evidence. Samuel played the helmet cam footage from Tinker's motorcycle, showing the arrest from a clear angle. The courtroom fell silent as they watched Officers Maddox and Harlan roughly handcuffing Evelyn, ignoring her explanations, marching her toward the squad car. Frank Dillard was called to the stand. Under Samuel's cross-examination, he grew increasingly defensive, contradicting his earlier statements about security concerns. When pressed about his different treatment of customers, he snapped, "Some people just raise more red flags than others." "And what flags did Mrs. Bird raise specifically?" Samuel asked. Frank hesitated. "It was just a feeling." "A feeling based on what, Mr. Dillard?" "Experience," Frank said stiffly. "Experience with elderly black women in particular?" By the time Officer Maddox took the stand, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Samuel methodically walked him through his actions that day, contrasting them with proper police procedure. When confronted with the evidence of retaliation, Maddox's composure cracked. "Look, we've got protocols for suspicious activity. Maybe they don't look pretty on camera, but I was doing my job. And was it also your job to drive by Mrs. Bird's home repeatedly? To issue frivolous citations?" Samuel pressed. "I patrol where I'm needed," Maddox snapped. "And some neighborhoods need more attention than others." "Neighborhoods like Mrs. Bird's?" Samuel asked quietly. "Those people," Maddox began, then caught himself. "That area has had issues." "What people, Officer Maddox?" Samuel asked, his voice perfectly calm. Maddox's face reddened. "I didn't mean anything by that." The day proceeded with witness after witness. Community members testified about similar experiences. Former officers spoke about the department's unwritten policies. Banking experts confirmed that Mrs. Bird's transaction should never have triggered suspicion. As the afternoon wore on, even Judge Thornton's impassive facade showed cracks of concern. He interrupted occasionally with pointed questions that suggested he was troubled by the pattern emerging. By 4 o'clock, both sides had presented their cases. Samuel's closing argument was brief but powerful, emphasizing not just the harm done to Evelyn, but the broader implications for the community. "Your Honor," he concluded, "what happened to Mrs. Bird was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was the predictable outcome of systemic prejudice that has been allowed to operate unchecked. We ask not just for damages, but for accountability and change." Judge Thornton removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The courtroom was silent, waiting. "I have heard considerable testimony today that requires careful consideration," he announced finally. "I will deliver my decision tomorrow morning. All parties are to return to this courtroom at 9:01 a.m. sharp." He struck his gavel. Court is adjourned. As people began to file out, Evelyn remained seated, her hands folded in her lap. She felt oddly calm, as if something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders. Whatever happened tomorrow, she had spoken her truth in a place where it had to be heard. Big Red approached, offering his arm. "You did good, Miss Evelyn. Real good." She smiled up at him, rising steadily to her feet. "We all did, Red. We all did." The courthouse was already packed by 8:30 Tuesday morning. People squeezed into the wooden benches, their whispers filling the room with a nervous energy. Evelyn sat at the plaintiff's table in her best navy dress, the one she usually saved for Easter Sunday. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her purse on her lap. Big Red, dressed in a clean button-down shirt that strained against his broad shoulders, sat beside her. His leather vest was still visible underneath. He wouldn't completely abandon his identity, even for court. When he noticed Evelyn's hands shaking, he reached over and offered his palm. She placed her small hand in his massive one and gripped tightly. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "you already won by standing up." Evelyn nodded, but couldn't find her voice. After decades of keeping her head down, of being invisible, of swallowing injustice with a polite smile, this moment felt almost unreal. The community filled the seats behind her. Church members, neighbors, former colleagues from the school cafeteria, and of course, the bikers, who occupied the back row like a leather-clad wall of support. Frank Dillard sat at the defense table looking smug, whispering to his attorney. Officer Maddox's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes fixed straight ahead, while Officer Harlan fidgeted nervously with his tie. At precisely 9 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge William Thornton. Everyone stood as Judge Thornton entered, his black robes flowing behind him. His face revealed nothing as he settled into his chair and arranged his papers. "You may be seated," he said, his voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. "After reviewing all testimony and evidence presented yesterday, I am prepared to deliver my ruling in the case of Byrd versus Stonebrook Federal Bank and the Stonebrook Police Department." The judge looked directly at Evelyn, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Byrd, I want to thank you for your courage in bringing this matter before the court. It is not easy to stand against powerful institutions, especially at your age." Evelyn straightened her back, dignity emanating from her despite her nervousness. Judge Thornton continued, "This court has been presented with overwhelming evidence of discriminatory practices, abuse of power, and retaliatory actions that have no place in our justice system or our community." Frank Dillard's smug expression began to fade. Maddox shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Byrd was targeted because of her race, subjected to humiliation and physical distress during an unwarranted arrest, and then suffered calculated retaliation when she sought justice. The helmet camera footage alone provides irrefutable proof of the officer's misconduct. Furthermore, the testimony of bank employees confirmed a pattern of racial discrimination at Stonebrook Federal that is both disturbing and illegal. The judge paused, looking over his glasses at the defendants. What is perhaps most troubling is not just the initial incident, but the coordinated effort to intimidate Mrs. Byrd into dropping her complaint, an effort that escalated to property damage and threats of violence. Evelyn's grip on Big Red's hand tightened. The room was completely silent. "Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff on all counts," Judge Thornton declared. "The court orders the following remedies." He looked down at his papers. "First, Stonebrook Federal Bank and the Stonebrook Police Department are jointly ordered to pay Mrs. Evelyn Byrd compensatory damages in the amount of $1.5 million for emotional distress, civil rights violations, and related damages." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn's free hand flew to her mouth. "Second, Frank Dillard is to be terminated from his position at Stonebrook Federal Bank, effective immediately, and barred from holding management positions in financial institutions for a period of no less than 7 years. Frank's face drained of color. His attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. Third, Officers Brent Maddox and Cliff Harlan are suspended without pay pending a federal civil rights investigation into their conduct. I am recommending their permanent removal from the force. Maddox's face twisted with anger, but Harlan simply slumped in his seat, staring at the table. Fourth, I am ordering a state-level inquiry into the practices of the Stonebrook Police Department, including a review of all complaints filed against its officers in the past 5 years. The police chief, seated in the gallery, closed his eyes briefly, his expression grave. Fifth, Stonebrook Federal Bank is fined $250,000 for discriminatory practices and ordered to implement anti-bias training for all employees, with results to be reviewed quarterly by an independent monitor. The judge set down his papers and looked at the entire courtroom. Let this ruling serve as a reminder that justice is not reserved for the powerful or the privileged. It belongs to every citizen, regardless of age, race, or social standing. This court will not tolerate the abuse of authority or discrimination in any form. He struck his gavel firmly. So ordered. Court is adjourned. For a moment, the courtroom was frozen in stunned silence. Then, as if a dam had broken, applause erupted. People stood, cheering and embracing one another. The bikers in the back, mindful of decorum, nodded approvingly, though Tinker let out a quiet, "Yes," under his breath. Tears streamed down Evelyn's cheeks. Big Red squeezed her hand gently, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Samuel turned to her with a broad smile, shaking her hand formally before giving in and hugging her. "We did it, Mrs. Bird," he said. "You did it." Evelyn could barely speak through her tears. "All these years," she managed. "All these years of keeping quiet." Big Red helped her to her feet as reporters began pressing forward, held back only by the bailiff. Frank Dillard stormed out of the courtroom, his attorney hurrying behind him. Officer Maddox stood rigid with fury, while Harlan seemed to have aged 10 years in the last hour. "Let's get you outside," Big Red said protectively. "Take a breath of fresh air." The bikers formed a loose honor guard, escorting Evelyn through the crowd. People reached out to touch her shoulder, to offer congratulations. Mrs. Geraldine Parker from next door embraced her, both women crying together. As they emerged onto the courthouse steps, the bright morning sun felt symbolic. A new day indeed. Reporters clustered at the bottom of the steps, cameras flashing. Evelyn paused, momentarily overwhelmed by the attention. "You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to," Big Red assured her. But Evelyn straightened her shoulders. "No, I think I should say something." Samuel stepped forward to address the press. "Mrs. Bird will make a brief statement. Please be respectful. She's had a long journey to this moment." The reporters fell silent as Evelyn approached the microphones that had been hastily assembled. Her supporters gathered behind her, church members, neighbors, and the bikers standing like sentinels. "I never wanted to be in court," Evelyn began, her voice quiet but steady. "I just wanted to help my granddaughter go to college. But when they put those handcuffs on me, something broke inside. Not just my heart, but the part of me that always stayed quiet." She took a deep breath. "This victory isn't just for me. It's for every person who was ever afraid to speak up. For every person who was told to know their place." Her voice grew stronger. "Today, the court said my place is right here. Equal under the law, deserving of respect, and brave enough to demand it." The crowd behind her erupted in applause again. Big Red stood stoically at her side, his presence a steady reminder of the unlikely alliance that had made this moment possible. As cameras flashed and reporters called out questions, Evelyn felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The bruises on her wrists had long faded, but only now did the deeper wound begin to heal, the one that came from decades of swallowed dignity. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.